A.W. Tozer explained that it's common for Christians to hold a low view of God. And he says something to the effect that this low view of God that is often advanced by the church is responsible for multitudes of other evils. But here's why I love the ontological argument, because I do think it's a sound argument, and I think it helps Christians think rightly about God. You know, A.W. Tozer explained that it's common for Christians to hold a low view of God. And he says something to the effect that this low view of God that is often advanced by the church is responsible for multitudes of other evils, multitudes of lesser evils, because we started by thinking incorrectly about God and holding a low view of God. In fact, it's one of the major reasons as to why I reject divine determinism and why I'm so, I'm pretty loud in my argument against this view of divine determinism, or what I call exhaustive divine determinism, that's held by many, if not most, Calvinists. And it's ultimately why I argue for Molinism. As I argue in my book, I believe that Molinism is the best way, if not the only way, to consistently make sense of God as a maximally great being. But I know some of my open theist friends would argue against that, but that's what I think. That's where I'm at right now. So with all that said, what do you think, Phil? What do you think of my thoughts? And then why do you like the ontological argument?
Yeah, this actually ties in with the other question you asked that I forgot to answer, which is why I started digging into this. And the reason, I think, first of all, the fact that you don't find that most people don't find an argument persuasive that doesn't mean it's a bad argument. That's right. If it's not quite the ad populum fallacy, it's pretty close. And especially in this case, modal logic is, most philosophers don't actually even learn it other than like a small section in a logic class. These are professional philosophers with doctorates. Yeah. The people who focus on modal logic more or less always say the logic behind this is sound. Well, no, let me rephrase. The logic behind this is valid, because that's an important distinction. And so for people to say, well, I don't find this persuasive, I don't find it compelling, that shouldn't necessarily dictate whether it's valid or sound. I can give you all kinds of sound arguments that I don't think should convince you of things. That doesn't, persuasiveness is more of a function of human psychology than it is the logic of the matter. And not that shouldn't come into play. I mean, you should talk I was talking to my students about this yesterday in relation to things. If I'm standing up in a church talking about apologetics, I'm going to talk very differently about it there than I would if I was at a secular university trying to give a case, because that's just rhetoric and human psychology. Yeah. So what got me fascinated about the ontological argument is, with most arguments from natural theology, I love the cosmological argument, the moral argument, the moral argument, the teleological argument. I think those are all really great. And I know J.P. Moreland has done one, the argument from consciousness, and in the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology, Timothy and Lydia McGrew have one on the argument from religious experience, and I think all that stuff's great. But the logic of all those, that's pretty cut and dried. Like the cosmological argument, the moral argument, nobody really misunderstands what these arguments are trying to do and how they work. Now, they may say they don't work, they may argue against the premises. Okay, fine, but there isn't really a lot of confusion over what the cosmological argument is trying to do. I think anybody I don't even think you need a basic course in logic to at least grasp where the thrust of that is trying to push you. With the ontological argument, on the other hand, everybody I looked at seemed to not even agree on what it was trying to do or how it was trying to do it. There was just people were it was really bizarre. There's a great quote from Bertrand Russell where he says something like, "It's very, very easy to be convinced that the argument's unsound, but really hard to figure out where it goes wrong." And that's what more or less everybody was saying. And so I thought, well, when I go into grad school, why don't I study this? It's really hard. People don't know what to do with it. So why don't I try and study it and figure it out? Because if you're going to do philosophy, maybe run after the hardest argument you can find. And maybe you find out there's nothing there and people are blowing smoke, or maybe you find it, oh, this is something really good and people are just misunderstanding it. And in this case, I think this is it's definitely a valid argument as far as the logic goes. Now, 95% of the time I want to say it's sound. 5% of the time I still have some doubts on that. But it's definitely logically valid. Of that I have no doubt whatsoever.